Magnitsky is expected to sign the bill into law. Spain respects the rights of private citizens to grow and consume cannabis. Thanks to this you-do philosophy, Spain has more than 800 dispensaries and private social clubs where enthusiasts lucky enough to get an investigative can consume cannabis while socializing with friends old and new. Just don't get caught selling it. Cannabis distribution is not tolerated. Catalonia legalized cannabis this year. In the Netherlands, marijuana is still illegal, but as long as you're not bothering anyone, officials generally turn a blind eye. In Amsterdam, however, social use is perfectly acceptable, thanks to a provision that allows for coffee shops where both residents and visitors can purchase cannabis products for on-site and even outdoor consumption. Recreational and medical cannabis use in Germany, little to worry about when it comes to possession and consumption. Recreational users may face a fine if caught, but no criminal penalties. And their medical marijuana program requires insurers to cover the cost of products for patients with severe conditions. Jamaica has long been known as a place where you can find ganja, but it wasn't until 2015 that cannabis was actually decriminalized in the country. Individuals caught with 2 ounces or less face a $5 fine. This year, the country introduced its medical marijuana program. Visitors to Jamaica who have legitimate medical prescriptions from their place of residence can acquire a cheap permit to purchase and use medical marijuana while visiting the island. If you're in Portugal, small quantities of a drug for personal consumption are considered non-criminal and can safely carry and consume cannabis privately. You may still get fined or be given orders for rehabilitation if caught, but when it comes to practice, such cases are usually suspended. Do not grow it, however. Cultivation is illegal. Even cannabis seeds are prohibited. In Argentina, it's okay to consume cannabis, but it's illegal to transport or cultivate the herb when it comes to medical marijuana. However, cannabis is available to qualified patients for free. In India, you can drink bhang, a cannabis drink, but no other cannabis use is tolerated. Visiting the Czech Republic, medical cannabis is legal for locals, and in many urban areas, Mary Jane is considered a low priority to authorities as long as you're not consuming it in public. In Australia, it depends on where you are. Some Australian states have decriminalized marijuana, while others enforce strict punishments for possession. Medical marijuana is allowed in very limited cases, and the criteria vary by region. Personal use is decriminalized in the Northern Territory, South Australia, and the Australian Capital Territory. Ecuador has decriminalized the personal use of up to 10 grams, while in Italy, medical and religious consumption is okay, but personal use, even small amounts, can net you a misdemeanor. In Mexico, up to 5 grams of cannabis is decriminalized. In 2016, Mexico's Senate approved a bill that would allow medical marijuana use by adults, which is the lower house of Congress, passed in April of this year. President Enrique Peña Nieto signed the legislation decree in June. Estonia doesn't mess around. Possession of up to 7.5 grams for personal use is okay, but any more than that and you face up to 5 years in jail. Up to 5 grams of cannabis is decriminalized in Austria, while in Belgium you can possess up to 3 grams without a criminal penalty. Other countries that have decriminalized small amounts of cannabis include Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Costa Rica, Croatia, Georgia, Greece, Italy, Luxembourg, Malta, Moldova, Paraguay, Russia, Slovenia, Ukraine, and the Virgin Islands. While the cultivation, sale, and use of cannabis is illegal in Switzerland, possession is decriminalized for small amounts. Products that contain less than 1% THC are allowed. In Cambodia, it's common practice for police to look the other way if locals are found in possession of cannabis, and Israeli citizens can possess small amounts of cannabis without a criminal penalty. Smoking in public, however, is not tolerated and carries a fine. No matter where you travel, be sure to familiarize yourself with the legality of cannabis and the full risks associated with its possession or consumption in that country. Thank you. You're listening to Smoke News Radio, Smoke World Report. Cannabis. Here's what a gram of cannabis costs in cities around the world. They have a chart, so it's not, you can't really see it. This is January 30th, 2018. 1 gram of cannabis, $32.66 in Tokyo, and $1.34 in Quito. The world's most expensive grams of cannabis can be yours for $33 on the illicit market in Tokyo. Wanting something legal and cheaper? Head to Quito, Ecuador, where the same weight of plant matter can be had for $1.34, and you can possess up to 10 grams without running afoul of the law. Those are the highs and lows according to a 2018 Cannabis Price Index released Wednesday morning by CEDO, the German company that manufactures small-scale hydroponic grow devices. CEDO's team of data experts selected 120 cities around the world in countries where the plant ranges from highly illegal to adult use legal, and surveyed street prices and store prices where legal, and annual consumption totals. One lesson seems fairly obvious from the data. Regulated legalization generally drives prices down for the consumer, but not always and everywhere. The least expensive cities tend to be partially legal nations: Ecuador, Colombia, Paraguay, and Uruguay. And the most expensive cities are all illegal, except Oslo, although they, or rather Norway, just decriminalized last month. All right. Washington, D.C. voted for adult use legality years ago, but Congress won't let... Ooh, beautiful. Woohoo! Somewhere here or the other. Okay. Sorry. Washington, D.C., you voted for adult use legality years ago, but Congress won't let you implement any regulatory process that would allow legal farming and sales. You can possess cannabis legally, but it's really hard to obtain it, and it's expensive, $18 a gram. It's a 20 bag. Meanwhile, the power of a legal regulated market has proven to be a boon to consumers in Denver and Seattle, where a gram goes for less than $8, although we know for some stores that sell it for $6. New York City, you are the king. CETO's data team estimated the Big Apple's consumption rate at a 77.44 metric tons per year, nearly twice the intake of the second city, Karachi. Meanwhile, in Singapore, where cannabis is extremely illegal, the entire city consumes only about 44 pounds of the stuff per year, and frankly, we're a bit surprised to find only a 0.44 metric tons of consumption in Razorback, a very hip and happening town. Then again, the city only has 123,000 people. Still, New York's per capita consumption works out to about 1/3 of an ounce per person. The residents of Iceland's capital consume a little less than half that. You're listening to Smoke News Radio. We're going to go find some cool stuff out there on the internet, and I'll bring it to you. Here we go. The Zimbabwe government suspends cannabis farming licensing. From Harar, the government has suspended the licensing and growing of marijuana, popularly known as mbanje. Last month, President Emmerson Mnangagwa's administration gazetted license fees for the interested in growing cannabis, mbanje, for research and medical purposes. This was seen as part of strategies to shore up revenue flows to the depressed fiscus. The development, which had divided opinion in the hugely polarized southern African nature, had made Zimbabwe the second country in Africa to legalize cultivation of the plant after the tiny kingdom of Lesotho announced the continent's first license to grow cannabis legally last year. Until now, it has been illegal to grow, possess, or use cannabis in Zimbabwe, with offenders facing up to 12 years in jail. But in an interview with the Daily News on Sunday, last Thursday, Deputy Finance Minister Terence Mukupe said the licensing of the dangerous high street value drug has been put on ice to enable government to plug loopholes that might arise in future. Mukupe revealed there has been an overwhelming response to the licenses, with over 350 applications being made to the Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe, which is responsible for protecting public and animal health by ensuring the accessible medicines and allied substances and medical devices are safe, effective, and of good quality through enforcement of adherence to standards by manufacturers and distributors. All the applications have been submitted to the MCAZ, which what has since happened is that has put everything on hold. He said, adding the response was quite overwhelming. The MCAZ has put on hold licensing until they are pretty clear in terms of all the modalities, like how do we actually implement, Mukupe said. He said government needed to conduct a proper feasibility study first. When I was talking to the Deputy Minister of Agriculture, he told me that they have over 350 applications. The expectations of most of the applicants was that they will be allowed to grow mbanje on their farms, and then there is so much difference in terms of what people are asking for. We had a Dutch investor whose proposal was saying that all he needed was 60 hectares, and out of 60 hectares, he was talking of making as much as 100 million to 200 million annually. And then we have another investor who's saying he needs 100,000 hectares, and out of 100,000 hectares, he was talking of making about 100 million to 200 million as well. There is too much of a difference. What has to be done on our side of government is probably to have a proper feasibility study and have experts telling us what's exactly the truth. When you go over the 350 applications, the difference in numbers and what they're talking about, it's crazy. However, the Deputy Finance Minister said there is definitely money to be made from Mbaje farming. If anything, it could end up being a billion-dollar crop for us within probably a 4 or 5 year period, easily. But the president is clear that if we're going to carry this out, it has to be in a highly controlled environment. He said, further stating, and probably we have to carry out the farming of marijuana on state-owned farms for easier regulation and also away from people. Places like Wobewi College, where there is no neighborhood and they have got the land. Areas like Kushiga Pikele, where there is land and it's in the middle of nowhere. Your prison farms like Mazawe Prison Farm, there's sort of areas that's where it will be ideal to grow something like that. The 5-year renewable licenses will allow growers to possess, transport, and sell fresh and dried cannabis as well as cannabis oil. Applicants should include plans of the growing site, quantity to be produced and sold, and the production period. A license can be refused when the information has been received from a peace officer, a competent authority of the United Nations, an applicant who was involved in diversion of a controlled substance or precursor to an illicit market or use. The minister may not oblige if the issuance, renewal, or amendment of the licensee is likely to create a risk of public health, safety, or security. According to the government gazette issued by the Health Child Care Minister, David Paraminaniatawa, Majawe growers would be required to pay an annual return fee of $15,000, while an application to renew a producer's license would cost $20,000, and a license to conduct research on cannabis has been pegged at $5,000. An application for renewal of a license to conduct research on cannabis will cost $2,500. Application for variation or amendment of a license, $2,500. Application for import-export license, $5,000, and the inspection license, $2,500. An application for the issuance of license in terms of Section 27 of the Act shall be made to the minister in duplicate and shall be accompanied by the appropriate fee and 3 copies of a plan of which the site proposed to be the license, which shall comply with the requirements specified in these regulations, the Gazette said. In the case of an individual, proof of citizen or proof of being ordinarily resident in Zimbabwe or proof of an exemption by the minister will be required. In the case of a company, proof of citizenship or proof of being an ordinarily resident in Zimbabwe of the majority of directors or proof of exemption by the minister and proof of incorporation in Zimbabwe of the company and of a declaration signed and dated by the proposed authorized person in charge, stating that the authorized person in charge, proposed responsible person in charge, and if applicable, the proposed alternate responsible person in charge are familiar with the provisions of the Act will be required, it said. Zimbabwe has been debating legalization of medical cannabis production as the government seeks new revenue for streams for its agricultural economy. Last month, Obert Mupafu, the then investment promotion minister, said a Canadian firm had applied to the government for a permit to produce the drug in a planned special economic zones designed to lure foreign investors. Zimbabwe is already one of the southern Africa's biggest tobacco producers, exporting much of its crop to China. Africa is second only to the Americas in terms of production and consumption of marijuana, according to the United Nations 2017 World Drug Report. Marijuana's scientific name is Cannabis sativa. Leaves, seeds, stems, and/or roots are consumed by marijuana users and for the purpose of feeling intoxicated. THC, or tetrahydrocannabinol, is one of the hundreds of compounds within marijuana that has major intoxicating effects. Marijuana that is consumed for medical purposes, like for patients with nausea or poor appetite associated with AIDS or cancer treatment, is legal in a few states of the United. Possession of marijuana, regardless of its purpose, is illegal in most jurisdictions. Marijuana is the most commonly abused illegal substance worldwide. While the number of people who use marijuana at any one time does not seem to have recently increased, the number of people who have a marijuana-related disorder has risen significantly. There is more or less true depending on age and ethnic group. Medical marijuana, also called Marinol, dronabinol, is a synthetic form of marijuana. There are many ways of referring to marijuana itself, as well as for how it is smoked. The history of marijuana goes back for thousands of years. It was only made illegal in many countries during the 20th century. Daily News. Thank you. You're listening to Smoke News Radio. All right, here you go, kids. Estonian district adopts cannabis flag after online poll. This is from the Reuters staff. In Kanepe, Estonia Rautas. A local government in Estonia has narrowly approved using a flag with an image of a cannabis leaf as its symbol after an online poll overwhelmingly voted for it. The name of the region, Kanepi, in southeastern Estonia, is derived from Kanep, the Estonian word for marijuana, and the hemp their ancestors grew and possessed into cloth, oil, and ropes more than 150 years ago. The need for a new flag came about after several different local government areas merged into the larger Kanepi. An open online poll in January collected more than 12,000 votes for the cannabis symbol, despite the population of the rural district and the village of Kanepe being less than 5,000. 9 members of the council then voted for the flag, with 8 against. Kanepe council member Areno Kak, who voted against the new symbol, told Reuters after the vote on Tuesday, "I must say that I am not for the fact that we will be marching under this kind of a flag." Council Chairman Kaido Koe, who supported adopting the leaf, said the process was very democratic, despite questions raised over the numbers involved in the online poll, and saw no reason to reject the symbol. Drugs are illegal to sell in Estonia. Possession and the use of small quantities of marijuana for personal use is a misdemeanor, punishable with a fine. Reporting by Janice Lysons and additional reporting David Medarste. Okay, John and Allison. All right, some stuff. Just find stuff real quick on the internet. This looks cool. Let's go. Smoke News Radio. What'd you find today, Jason? In Australia, is Australia ready to legalize marijuana? Not yet, it seems. Australia. For a brief moment on Monday, marijuana users rallied around a proposal from the Greens Party to legalize the drug's use for recreational purposes in Australia. But those hopes were quashed the next day as Greg Hunt, the Minister for Health, so the government would oppose the plan. Marijuana, he said, was a gateway to other drugs like methamphetamines. Our job is to protect the health of Australians, he said on Tuesday. This action by the Greens risks the health of Australians. Here's what you should know about the marijuana debate in Australia. How might marijuana legalization work? The Greens' plan envisions a government-regulated system in which a newly created agency would act as a wholesaler, buying marijuana from farmers and selling it to licensed shops. The proposal would also allow adults to grow up to 6 plants for personal use, and it would ban purchases by those under 18 and prohibit advertisement of the product. As the alcohol and tobacco cannabis sales would be taxed, revenue would go to the federal budget to fund education, treatment, and harm reduction programs. Quite simply, the war on drugs is really a war on people. Richard de Nadeley, the party's leader, told the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, "We need to get real about the cannabis use in Australia." Among other measures, the legalization proposal from the Greens Party would let adults grow up to 6 plants for personal use. Credit David Morris Smith for the New York Times. What's the current situation in Australia? Possession of marijuana for recreational purposes is illegal in Australia. It's the most widely used illicit drug in the country. According to a report from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, 1 in 10 Australians have used cannabis in the last 12 months. In some states, like the Australian Capital Territory, Southern Australia, and the Northern Territory, possession of small amounts of marijuana has been effectively decriminalized, with the offenders facing civil penalties like fines and being ordered to undergo counseling. In other states, like New South Wales, Victoria, and Queensland, police officers often issue warnings to those facing minor drug charges, with offenders diverted to education programs. Cultivating, selling, or transporting marijuana, however, can incur criminal charges anywhere in the country. If somebody is found with a small amount of cannabis for personal use, the primary response for me isn't a law enforcement response, it's a public response, says Professor Steve Alsop of the National Drug Research Institute at Curtin University. Putting people in the criminal justice system creates harm. In 2016, the Australian legalized marijuana for medical use, but patients say that they face steep challenges trying to obtain the drug, including limited supply, uninformed doctors, and high costs. Worldwide, where is marijuana legal? Currently, marijuana is only fully legal in a few places, Uruguay and parts of the United States. In Uruguay, which became the first country to legalize marijuana in 2013, it's even sold in pharmacies. But dozens of other countries have relaxed their marijuana laws over the years. Legalizing medical marijuana, decriminalized recreational use, or easing the enforcement of possession laws. Argentina, Cambodia, Canada, Spain, and the Netherlands, Colombia, Peru, and North Korea are just some of the countries that don't criminalize marijuana use. One notable example is Portugal, where the use of all illicit drugs were criminalized in 2001, and drug users are mainly sent to treatment programs or fined. Since then, the country's prevalence of HIV infection and drug-related imprisonment and overdose have dropped. Jamaica, a country long associated with marijuana and Rastafarianism, has also relaxed its laws around marijuana possession in 2015. So will Australia's marijuana laws change? For now, Australia's government says no, and being careful and conservative in legalizing marijuana might not be such a bad thing, Professor Alsop says. If you legalize a form of drug use, once you've done that, it's very hard to go backwards, he said. there should be carefully evaluated steps to change rather than a great leap into the unknown. It's unlikely the issue will go away, particularly since legalization has the support of a major political party like the Greens. Professor Alsop, who supports a model like that of Portugal's, says the push to see drugs as a public health issue seems to be gaining momentum over the long term. I think there's an appetite to do that, he said. Thank you. You're listening to Smoke News Radio. The 4 biggest barriers to marijuana legalization, according to Harvard. Operating since 1974, the Canadian coffee chain Second Cup has always kept an edge on Starbucks with a few specialties. They have a wider selection of croissants. They have a line of crisp Italian sodas with a variety of flavors, and will even mix them if you ask nicely. And now, with recreational cannabis sales expected to become federally legal throughout Canada this summer, the coffee chain has announced another big item that'll be added to the menu: cannabis. Cannabis is going to be an awfully big business in Canada, said Second Cup chairman Michael Berman. And we have some amazing locations. I wish I knew now in what form we would be pursuing and participating. We're just trying to position ourselves so that we can participate as the opportunities arise and the legalization is formed. The coffee chain hasn't announced how its weed offerings will manifest with the legalization on the horizon, mostly airing its intentions in partnership with the National Access Cannabis Corp, or NAC for short, to introduce pot in the near future. Berman said the idea didn't develop internally, but came out of questions and suggestions from several cannabis makers that came to them. Second Cup has nearly 300 locations across Canada, while NAC has 9. Of course, only one of the 2 companies is licensed to sell weed at the moment. Second Cup, like any other business, will have to apply for proper licenses to distribute weed, though having NAC as a partner will likely hasten the process. Ownership of the Second Cup dispensaries will be split 50-50 between the companies. At the moment, a number of Canadian provinces, including Ontario, have limited cannabis distribution to the local government. The door is still open. However, in provinces like British Columbia, Manitoba, Alberta, and Saskatchewan for outside retailers. Since the announcement, Second Cup shares have jumped 30%. It's an interesting development in the world of Canadian weed sales, and I'd be much more excited if they announced the return of those chocolate chunk muffins. Uruguay sells recreational marijuana to more than 16,000 people 5 months after legalizing the drug. The government has upped THC levels of the drug from 2% to 9%. From the Independent U.S. Sales became legal on 19th of July. Getty. 5 months after legalizing recreational marijuana, there are more than 16,000 Uruguayans registered to buy the drug from pharmacies, up from 5,000 users in July. People in Uruguay can also grow plants at home or become a member of a local cannabis club to withdraw up to 40 grams of marijuana per month. There are 70 membership clubs, according to data from the Institute for Regulation and Control of Cannabis website. With many countries around the world campaigning to legalize the sale and purchase of marijuana, the world's eyes are on countries like Uruguay to see how the government coped with the new system and what obstacles they encountered. At the pharmacies, people are vetted via a fingerprint scan and handed a thermo-sealed pack, as much as $70 cheaper than much less quality substance on the streets. Thanks to a separation of church and state in the Catholic country, Uruguay has been at the forefront of liberal policies compared to much of its larger South American neighbors. Israel is trying to take over the medical marijuana world, by Julia Gloom, 11/9/17. Americans may soon be able to get medical marijuana from an unlikely drug dealer, Israel. Bloomberg reported Thursday that 2018 could be a big year for the country's quest to become a global pot provider. Israel's government is on track to pass regulations that would allow growers to export their products, and at least one company, Breath of Life Pharma, is aiming to submit an application to the US FDA in hopes of getting legal approval to bring experimental to treatment statewide. It's all part of a mission to capture a piece of a market expected to exceed $30 billion over the next 7 years and help patients worldwide get some much-needed relief from their chronic conditions. The seriousness from which the Israeli scientific community approaches this incomparable. Charles Polak, a medical cannabis expert at Thomas Jefferson University, told Rolling Stone recently. Marijuana is illegal at the federal level in the United States, where the government considers it a Schedule I substance with no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. The FDA notes on its website that it hasn't approved any botanical marijuana treatments, even as some 29 states have voted to legalize medical marijuana. The plant is also outlawed in Israel, but the marijuana research industry there is thriving. Israel, along with Canada and the Netherlands, has a government-sponsored medical marijuana program. According to the U.S. News and World Report, as of April, there were more than 100 cannabis-related clinical trials taking place there. Scientists are looking into how marijuana could help people with conditions like autism, arthritis, epilepsy, Alzheimer's, cancer, and other conditions. The world's best cannabis scientists and researchers are all out of Israel. No other country comes close, American businessman Gary Engel told U.S. News. This summer, the Israeli government approved a plan to let its 30,000 patients access medical marijuana more easily. Then in August, Israeli Minister of Agriculture Uri Ariel said that he expects Israel's farmers will be allowed to grow cannabis and take it abroad within 2 years, according to the Times of Israel. In the meantime, Israel has continued to make advances in the field. Assad Academic College of Jerusalem recently began offering a medical marijuana course that explores the history, laws, jobs, and pros and cons of the drug. And just last month, a company called Sky Medical unveiled a medical marijuana inhaler that allows patients to take specific doses. When you go to get a medicine, even antibiotics, you know exactly what you are getting. Biologist Hinyat Kolotai told Haaretz, "We want medical marijuana to be the same." Thank you. You're listening to Smoke News Radio. Marijuana World Report. Smoke, smoke, smoke news radio, radio, radio. With the fall, with the fun scrollio, scrollio. Australia's marijuana growers hit record high. Ooh. Decision to legalize cannabis for export boosts industry. By legalizing medical marijuana, Australia is hoping to tap into a market projected to be worth $6 $53.5 billion by 2024. This is Jamie Smith in Sydney, January 4th, 2018. Canberra has announced it is to legalize exports of marijuana products and pushing the share prices of almost a dozen locally listed cannabis producers to record highs. Australia joins Canada, Israel, and the Netherlands and Uruguay in targeting the fast-growing legal global marijuana market, which forecasters predict could be worth $63.5 billion by 2024. Shares in Can Group, Auscan Group, Bod Australia, and other several cannabis producers have closed at record highs on the ASX following Thursday's announcement. Canberra said legalizing exports would secure supplies for Australian patients and providing opportunities for producers. We would like to be potentially the world's #1 cannabis supplier, said Greg Hunt, Australia's Minister for Health. By helping the domestic manufacturers to expand, this in turn helps to ensure an ongoing supply of cannabis products here in Australia. Medical marijuana is mainly prescribed to relieve pain for a number of conditions, including multiple sclerosis and epilepsy. Australia is one of the world's biggest exporters of the raw ingredients for painkillers such as Solpadeine or cocodamol, which are derived from poppy grown on the southern island of Tasmania. But cultivation of cannabis is much smaller than in Canada, the Netherlands, and Uruguay, which has already legalized and exports of medical marijuana products. During the past 3 years, Australia has attracted interest from foreign companies and local entrepreneurs seeking to produce medical cannabis while raising funds on the local stock market, where the investors maintain an appetite for high-risk ventures. Can Group, an Australian company that was issued the first cultivation license by the government in March, raised a $12.5 million from its initial public offering on the ASX in May. It is raising an extra $78 million to build a manufacturing facility and target overseas exports. At the moment, there are only 300 patients registered for medical cannabis treatment, which is not enough to build an industry on, said Peter Kroc, Chief Executive of the Can Group. But we know demand for the medical cannabis is outstripping supply overseas, and this allows us to expand. Shares in Can Group closed at 35% at $3.90, a record high. Elaine Darby, Managing Director of US Can, Auscan, an ASX-listed company with a license to grow and manufacture medical cannabis medicines in Australia, said the government's decision was a win for the industry and the patients. Cha-ching! It allows us to produce cost-effective products at scale, she said. Auscan shares closed at 56% at a $1.26 record high. From the Financial Times. Thank you. You're listening to Smoke News Radio. Marijuana, the Congo's New Cash Crop, by Jacob Kushner, The Daily Dose, November 2017. Before he started growing weed, Congolese planter Coty spent his days digging holes and tunnels, mining for morsels of gold. He would smoke weed, or bangi, as he calls it, bangi, to overcome his fear of the darkness that he faced underground. As a teen, he saw a tunnel collapse, trapping 5 fellow miners. Only one was rescued. It's dangerous, says Coty, of illegal minerals trade that many Eastern Congolese families depend on. People were dying. The tragedy frightened him, but with no other source of income, he was back on the mine the next day. Then in 2007, a foreign mining company kicked Coty and other small-time miners off the land. With no other job, he bought cannabis seeds from a native, planted them, and 6 months later harvested a crop of cannabis that measured in the kilos. I had no other job, said Coty, who asked that his real name be withheld out of fear of authorities, so I decided to start growing marijuana. The Democratic Republic of Congo, America's second largest nation by area, is known for nefarious trade in copper, coltan, cobalt, tin, and other minerals. But now tens of thousands of Congolese like Coty are setting their sights on a different sort of illegal resource, cannabis. The United Nations estimates that Africa produces 10,500 metric tons of cannabis, a fourth of all of the marijuana in the world. Between 27 million and 53 million Africans use the drug, making up about one-fourth of all weed users worldwide. Congo, some narcotics experts believe, may produce more cannabis than almost any other African nation except South Africa. Marijuana farming is illegal in Congo, where the rarity of record keeping, especially in remote regions like rural South Kivu province, makes it hard to chart the exact moment when the crop's popularity exploded. But research by University of California, Berkeley, visiting professor of geography Anne Lanty suggests 60% of farmers in parts of eastern Congo's Kivu and 90% in some locations grow at least some cannabis. Everyone but the priests is how one Congolese village priest described the prevalence of marijuana farming in Landati. It's like the gold rush in America in the 1800s, says Landati, of the excitement of some who have set their hopes on growing cannabis. The appeal isn't surprising. A resilient plant, cannabis can yield multiple harvests a year, beginning 6 months after sowing, says Landati, and it needs little labor beyond harvesting and drying. It offers men like Coty the chance to stay at home rather than set off to the mines, keeping families together. And unlike minerals, which are hard to come by and in limited supply, cannabis is a renewable resource. Many people smoke it because it gives them work strength, says Coty, and many more people are using it than in the past. But while cannabis farming comes without physical fears that accompany mining, it carries its own share of risks, wrapped in politics from across the Atlantic. Decades of United States and international pressure are a key reason why cannabis cultivation is illegal in Congo. In 1961, the U.S. voted in favor of the UN's Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, which added marijuana to the list of drugs that were banned internationally. The way to solve America's drug problem was by pinching off the global supply, or so thinking went. Farmers can't receive international aid to grow an illegal crop, but it also leaves them vulnerable to harassment from corrupt police officials, a threat Coty knows only too well: hide and seek. Each morning, Coty treks by foot from his home through lush vegetation to the spots where he grows his cannabis, far from any roads or obvious footpaths. He does what he can to prune the plants and weed around them, but ultimately their growth depends upon the rains. Twice a year, Coty harvests and sells his traders, who come to his fields to collect. If it rains little, he winds up with as few as 5 100-kilo sacks of cannabis. When it rains well, he harvests as many as 20. Each sack goes for 150,000 to 200,000 Congolese francs, 96 to 128, earning him more than $1,000 a year. I use that money to pay for the school fees for my children, says Coty, adding that in his village in South Kivu province, many children study by means of hemp money. Since Coty began farming cannabis, his family no longer lives hand to mouth. They eat twice a page. I read that one. We read the Brazil. Intel Global Bodies. CBD extracts. Smoking pot. Okay, you got distill. UK claims to be the bombs. The global cannabis. Okay, thank you. Smoke News Radio. The global cannabis market, how Europe is chipping in the market mogul on November 9th, 2017. Poland has just legalized medical cannabis. Germany is considering selling in pharmacies and dispensaries. Several African nations are all mulling it over. Even the United Kingdom seems to be considering the prospect, though the Prime Minister's government is opposed, so one should not be surprised if it comes to naught. U.S. market hits speed bump. The U.S. remains the fastest growing market for legal marijuana. Cannabis has become a true industry in several states since Colorado approved recreational use. 64% of the U.S. population now approves of legalization, and more than half the states have passed laws allowing its use medicinally. Surprisingly, it seems on the persist of reversing direction. Cannabis is still illegal under federal law, and U.S. Attorney Jeff Sessions, the highest law enforcement official in the nation, has repeatedly indicated that he would like to enforce the law. Sessions still considers marijuana an unsafe, addictive, and medically useless substance. He has called for the repeal of a budget amendment that prevents the federal government from overriding state laws allowing medical and/or recreational use. Okay, December 19th. All right. In the United Kingdom, former cabinet minister and marijuana decriminalization proponent Sir Edward Davey estimated that between 2013 and 16 alone, met police 3.1 million to keep 6,900 people in holding cells for 12 hours because of cannabis-related offenses. The global marijuana market is currently worth $7.7 billion and could exceed $31 billion by 2021, according to cannabis market researcher the Brightfield Group. Meanwhile, nations are legalizing medical marijuana and decriminalizing possession for use, including several European countries. If European nations legalize cannabis, the European report estimates the value of Europe's market alone could be 56.2 billion or 65 billion. That's a big if, since no European country has fully legalized use yet of marijuana. In Germany, where medical marijuana for the seriously ill was only approved last year, the market has a value of 10.2 billion. According to ECR, negotiations to form a coalition government may further legalize cannabis. If Germany did legalize recreational marijuana as well, the market value could rise to 14.7 billion. 17.14 billion is the value of the global marijuana market. 7.7 billion is the 17 billion. Oh my gosh. On November 1st, legislation took effect allowing Polish pharmacies to sell medical marijuana to qualifying patients who suffer from chronic pain, chemotherapy side effects such as nausea, complications from multiple sclerosis, and epilepsy that do not respond to other drugs. According to a Polish pharmaceutical chamber estimate, up to 300,000 patients could qualify for medical marijuana treatment. There is no provision allowing for the growing of marijuana in Poland, however. Pharmacists will have to import cannabis from the Netherlands and make it into medicine, increasing the costs and reducing the availability. 1 gram of marijuana may cost more than 13 or 10. Marijuana is officially illegal in Spain, but the country is getting a reputation as a new Amsterdam because of the many so-called cannabis clubs where people can consume cannabis in private. They've expanded. Wait, 1 second. Here we go. In the UK, there seems to be a growing interest in allowing medical marijuana for at least some conditions. Last month, Labor lawmaker Paul Flynn introduced a bill to legalize medical marijuana and attend a tea party outside Parliament. But since the ruling Conservative Party is not in favor of legalization, it is not expected to pass in its current form. Still, Canatech, a global legal marijuana industry conference, took place in East London despite the lack of government approval, because London is still the financial hub of Europe. Biggest medical cannabis company in the world is British, and British universities conduct a lot of cannabis research. If marijuana laws aren't usually enforced, why legalize it? It is not more exhilarating to be breaking a law, to experience an illicit thrill that really harms no one. Because nothing is 100% harmless. Although marijuana has never caused a proven overdose death, it may cause harm in other ways, particularly to adolescent brains. In the U.S., its designation as Schedule 1 has severely limited research into its effects, with the same people supporting it remains on that list, saying there is no proof that it does good. In Britain, the first official cannabis research facility only opened this summer. In the absence of proper scientific vetting, people must resort to anecdotal evidence or personal experience, but not everyone's personal experience is the same or will necessarily have the same results. Then too, if marijuana is not legal, it cannot be regulated, and one does not know what one is getting without any certainty. According to reports, much of the cannabis sold in the black market is very potent, high in the THC that gets users high and responsible for other negative effects. CBD, cannabinol, is non-euphoric, is a moderating component of marijuana, counteracting many of THC's negative effects and allegedly providing benefits of its own. CBD does not get one high, but may help with the chronic pain. Some researchers believe marijuana that is high in CBD but contains some THC provides the best results. That is the anecdotal evidence. In the midst of an opioid prescription painkiller epidemic, devoting scarce resources to prosecuting, some might say persecuting, marijuana users seems absurd, particularly since cannabis may help prevent, replace, and wean addicts from opioids. Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous can assist with addiction treatment, even at a non-12-step rehab, but they aren't a treatment in themselves. Marijuana legalization may be inevitable. Even if marijuana is harmful, it may be too late to put the genie back in the bottle. Although marijuana use in teens has declined in recent years on both sides of the Atlantic, too many people believe it has medical benefits or just like it and have not seen the negative effects on their life, health, career, or relationships that opponents have depicted as almost inevitable. Whatever harm marijuana may cause, like alcohol and tobacco, they must now be mitigated with rigorous scientific research, information, regulation, honest public service announcements, and treatments. All that takes money, which taxation of marijuana could help provide. Prohibition or just say no does not work when nobody believes or agrees with you. Smoke News Radio. Here we go. Germany court stops tendering process for medical marijuana. In the news, DW. Dusseldorf's higher regional court on Wednesday ruled to stop the controversial tendering process for firms wishing to grow and supply cannabis for medical purposes within Germany. The lucrative contract was for the production and delivery of up to 6.6 metric tons of cannabis per year, with the cultivation planned to take place within Germany. However, the tendering process was deemed to have taken place over too short a period of time. In April, Germany's Federal Agency for Medicines and Medicine Products released an 18-page tender document for which 118 companies applied. It emphasized the growing of up to 6.6 kilograms by year 2022. The first harvest had been planned for 2019, reacting with disappointment. The Boone-based BFARM said it would not now be possible. In a statement, the agency, which would pass cannabis on to pharmacies, said it would make the necessary decisions to be able to start a new tendering process as soon as possible. Some of the 10 firms made the short list, and the decision had been imminent. However, the bidding process was fraught with complications and a number of complaints were made. The Dusseldorf court was charged with ruling on 4 grievances from different companies. At least one